Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, we're wrapping up 2024 and looking ahead with LRyan Moynihan, CEO of Gaidge and General Manager of the Dental and Orthodontic Division of Practice Tech. LRyan will be sharing key data insights from the past year, including buyer trends, treatment preferences, and payment strategy, and offer advice on what to expect in 2025. If you're ready to future-proof your practice with actionable tips and expert insights, this episode is right for you. So let's get into it. We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy, and technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. All right, Ryan, great to have you back on Hey Docs again. Good seeing
Thanks
you.
for having me. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. So I'm super excited to have you back on again. Of course, it's always one of my favorite things, especially to do kind of a year-end review with you, because you just have so much knowledge on the industry. But before we jump into that, in the event that somebody doesn't know who you are or, doesn't know what you are doing, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your roles, not only at Gaidge, but also Practice Tech?
Yeah, for sure. So it's been kind of a 7.5 year journey now. So I've been at Gaidge CEO since 2017. So how time flies when you're having fun.
Right.
We did transact about 3 years ago. So we're part of a bigger corporation now called Practice Tech. So within that, if you think about just retail healthcare, we've got 19 different brands across 4 different verticals. So I've actually, in addition to my Gaidge responsibilities, managed the dental vertical, which includes dental and ortho software companies. Some of the companies you guys might be familiar with, obviously Gaidge is in there, EasyRx is in there, Tops is in there. Oasis is kind of a legacy practice management system. And then we flip over to the dental side. There's a new practice management system called Aura that has just been brought to the marketplace. It's kind of an all-in-one. And then we also have a lab company called Magic Touch. So if you think about, like, we're across ortho and dental, but also in the lab space as well. All up, I think there's 7 different companies that roll up into this vertical. So we've been busy over the last couple of years, just as we've acquired companies and integrating them. And then I think one of the great things we're trying to do at Practice Tech is bring everything together and see the synergies between the different companies. So especially even with Gaidge, we've been able to white label some of the products that are in the rest of the portfolio. So not only do we have the dental portfolio, but we also have a chiropractic portfolio, a vision portfolio, and then a wellness portfolio. So 19 brands across those 4 make up all the Practice Tech. So it's been a lot of fun to build that and kind of see where that goes, and then just continue to be part of the orthodontic industry and just watch that grow and evolve and the changes and transformations that have happened there as well. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me professionally. My wife, Maria, we've been married now for 15 years. We got 2 boys, 14 and 12, just started the high school game. So that's always been a lot of fun. And we have a middle schooler now too. So we're kind of in both. We've already been through middle school with one, but now we're starting with the second one. So yeah, we're busy with, all sports. Maria's very musically inclined as well. So she's taught the boys piano. So they're great pianists as well. So hopefully they're a lot more well-rounded than I'll ever be. So that's good. I take them down the sports road. She takes them down every other road. So
I love that.
Which is a lot of fun. But, one of the things that I want to talk about, just we had the chance to go to the Amazon jungle over Christmas, which was really cool. And I was very hesitant to go just because I'm more of a stay in a hotel type guy.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to be staying on this boat, cruising up and down the Amazon for the better part of 10 days, fishing every day. And obviously when you get down to the Amazon, there's a lot of creatures there that can, kill you and eat you. And
Don't fall in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. It was absolutely something I never even expected. It was unbelievable. Just the views that you got on the Amazon, the water was so flat. So you talk about glass and you talk about just the cloud coverings and just how it cascaded on the foliage around was just incredible. We also had the opportunity to fish for the trophy peacock bass, which is a real fighting fish down there. Every day you kind of get up and go out and do some fishing and bring back it's catch and release. But my first day fishing, right, I'm learning how to cast and pull them in. And I hooked a caiman, which is basically a crocodile. I hooked it by the back leg. So all of a sudden I'm pulling in something that is a lot heavier than your typical fish, right? And then we got it to the boat and sure enough, it's a baby caiman. And so the guide, they know how to handle these things, right? So they bring it in. So obviously you get a picture with it and everything, but just, for me, not being a fishing guy, to go down there and pull in a crocodile on day one was like pretty incredible. So the second night got even better. We went caiman hunting. So you get out on your boats at night and you shine the flashlight on their eyes. And so the distance between their eyes is how big they are. So basically what they're doing is they're looking for the babies, and then the flashlight freezes them because they float on the water. And then the guides actually jump in and wrestle them into the boat.
Oh my gosh.
And so they brought in a baby one into the boat, and then we're all able to like carry it and hold it up by its neck and everything. So you're just like, okay, I'm in the Amazon. What am I doing? This is crazy. So that was a lot of fun. And then I think one of the highlights was we got to visit an indigenous Amazon village. We did a little like mission work there, which was pretty cool. So like to see these 78 families, that just don't really have anything compared to like what you and I would have or everybody in America. So it's a really cool perspective there. And my little guy got to get out on their soccer field and play with the kids in the village. And that was just really special. I got some good video on that on my Facebook page of the whole trip as well. So that was really neat to see. And just dirt field, potholes, rain filling up the potholes from the storm that just passed, like 2 sticks for the goal, a little crossbar. But those kids are like some of the happiest kids you'd ever meet. So we did some songs in Portuguese and stuff like that. So it was just a really, really cool experience all around. So I feel very fortunate. And I would say something that I was totally apprehensive to do now, going there, I'm like, I want to go back. And like I think we're going to do another trip in October. So can recruit some orthodontists to go. I think they would absolutely love it. Some thrill seekers there. So we're going to go deeper into the Amazon. We're going to take the float plane in and catch bigger fish, actually. So it'll be really cool. But then even it rained on us for 3 or 4 hours at a time and just pelting us. And it was just amazing being out there on the water with that. So it was cool. The lagoon they take you into is just some of the most majestic scenery you can possibly imagine. So it was awesome. So
wow, what an experience to get to not only have that yourself, but to be able to share that with your kids. And, I have had the opportunity over my lifetime to do a lot of third world countries and be able to go in and do some, just being able to help in medical and dental, facilities over there. And it really is, amazing when you get that opportunity to give back a little bit. And, it's beautiful to be able to just have the experience, but then also to be able to give back and come back and be like, man, we really are blessed living in the country, no matter how bad it may seem. Yeah. Put yourself in a third world country and you're going to come back going, it's not nearly as bad, is it?
Yeah, you not have problems here, and we got it really, really good. So frames your perspective and then also gets you out of self, which is really important. So
yeah, that's great. Well, as we move on from what a great opportunity to kind of finish up the year, that does kind of lead me into what I wanted to talk about this year on Hey Docs is just kind of looking back at our 2024. And, when I think about who's my guy that I'm going to go to get us the data that we need, and I know we did this last year as well, Ryan, you're it, tag. What I would really like to do is have you give us the State of the Union for recapping 2024 and then maybe a little look into 2025, but just kind of that big picture recap, some key data points that you within the company of Gaidge were able to define, and maybe some things that really stood out to you, either take note of or be aware of, thinking about what we're heading into with 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last year was better than 23, right? But it wasn't something we're going to like write home about. It was one of those years and it was really interesting. One thing I did this year that I haven't done in years past, because some of the months were so erratic, you would see 10% growth, 10% decline, but we had a leap year, and the way the calendar lined up, we actually, even with a leap year, we had 3 less working in the year. Okay. So, but the good news is, even with 3 less working days, by the time we finished the year with positive production growth, which is cool. So we finally got like above the line there. Where in the 2 years past since almost the COVID year, 2021, we really haven't seen growth in the orthodontic industry. So 22 and 23 were down. So the fact that 23 started to peak above the line, only 1%. So nothing, really big to write home about. But however, what I will say is the front half of the year had those big swings, and some of those down months were pretty sizable if it was like the high single digits. But what I will say in the back 6 months, 4 of those 6 months were actually really positive, and those positives were in the high single digits as well. So that it averaged about 7.3% just looking at those 4 months. And then if you take the 6 months, because there was a couple down months, but it was about 3.7%. So the historical, and there's a chart that I show in a lot of my lectures, is a rates of change chart. And if we go back to pre-COVID, you'll see that chart with a 12-month rolling and a 3-month, and it's very narrow in a range. And then you get into COVID, it spikes up and it spikes down. And then we've been kind of fighting back ever since, it kind of came down after COVID. So, but the point being is that 3.7%, that's the average. That's kind of really good for orthodontics, between 3 and 5%, somewhere in there. So we started to see that consistently for a 6-month period on the back end of the year. And then if we look at, as now, even I think there's an ADA survey out there with GPs that because of the election results and the economy, there's a lot of favorability into what 25 and 26 are going to bring to the marketplace. I know Chris Benson has been bullish on that. A lot of the economic stuff that I look at has been bullish on 25 and 26 as being growth years for the economy. All signs point to this is going to be a very favorable year for orthodontics as we get into it. So we're excited about that and optimistic about that, especially the way that the year ended, to get back above zero and be able to show that, call it 3.7% growth the back half of the year. So we're really excited and encouraged about that. We move into 2020. Just kind of looking at some of the highlights from last year, net collection as well came up. So that's obviously good. That has been negative in the past as well. So with your production collection going up, I think we're in a good spot there. Our patient calls were down year over year, but the percent down improved over 23. So we're making progress that way. And I always like to look at the patient funnel when we look at, you start with your patient calls, you get into your exams, and then you get into your starts, and kind of where's that fall off there and what does that look like? So we still have opportunity. Our starts were still down over 2023. However, it's really driven by aligners. And so aligners, once again, was down close to that double digit. So it's like 9.5%. But the last 3 years, it's been down double digit, and then like kind of 9.5%. Aligners are still down, like the share of chair in the practice where you look at aligners versus total starts. We were anticipating that was going to move into the 30% range, but actually has moved backwards. It kind of peaked at 28, 29%. Last year, it ended at 25%. So it was down about 2.5 points over 2023. So what we're seeing is that, as a percent of total, practices are actually using more fixed appliances versus aligners in their practice. And that trend has continued, over the last couple of years. So something that we thought maybe would get to the 40% share of chair mark. As an industry, definitely we're not going that direction as of now. Potentially that still happens out in the future, but as far as right now, we're not necessarily seeing that. So that was one area. And then another area that I thought was really good to see was, even though our new patient exams were slightly down, but still better than prior year, adult exams showed growth for the first time in 3 years. So if we go back to our COVID time, we had the Zoom effect, right? We saw those adult exams go up about 24%. Everybody's running in to get aligners. And then that just fell off the cliff, right? And so the adults were down double digits when it came to exams. And I know that's helping drive some of the downfall in the aligners on the year-to-year basis. So the fact that they've actually returned back to a positive has helped the aligners come down off that double digit, but they're still, down enough. But that's, I think, a positive sign that, adults are potentially now returning back into the orthodontic office. So those are a couple of big things that we saw, at least just kind of at a macro aggregate level, high level, big picture in 2024.
I love hearing these numbers, and that just kind of takes me into just starting to think about those buyer trends and kind of seeing the conversions that are happening, adults versus kids, aligners versus fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think there's a bigger influx into some of the, call it the digital fixed appliances that go into that category, at least, whether it's a Lightforce or Kalo and, other appliances that are out there. I definitely think we're seeing that as a way. I mean, it comes down to a lot of the stuff that we talk about is around profitability and treatment efficiency. And so whether it is an aligner, whether it is a fixed appliance or a digital fixed appliance, like at least at that point, can I get my number of visits to be reduced? Some of those companies have really focused on that, and they're getting some really good clinical results based on reducing the number of visits. So that definitely is one of the factors that's showing, call it the all other starts to show growth with the aligners, not showing growth and potentially that share of chair being impacted a little bit from that standpoint. So we're definitely seeing that play out in the space. A couple other things, just as you start to look at just even average contract, obviously we were in an inflationary environment. Last year, we only saw growth in that of about 1.7%. Down payment was flat, a little bit higher growth on the average contract amount versus the 1.7. The down payment's probably fine. It's at a good spot there around $800. But yeah, if we could have seen a little bit more based on the economy that we're in, I think that would have been good. So, we're seeing just a different mix when it comes to the digitization of some of these other offerings.
And it makes me wonder, as docs are listening to this and they're kind of thinking, okay, this is great data, but how do I apply that going forward? And I think it's, really interesting. And I just want to pick on one thing that you just said, because this could be one of those things where how do you apply it is, I think it's been very easy. And, I definitely heard this, especially coming out of COVID, where everybody was like, raise your fees, raise your fees, raise your fees, da, 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 da. And you look at the data and, whether people raised their fees and realized maybe, going up 5, 7, 10%, wasn't what we needed, especially with an economy where our inflation is coming up so much. I always look at it from a consulting side. I'd rather the long end game of the fees and the total treatment fee is one thing, but we got to get this, I always say my rude analogy is butts in the chair starts on the books, right? I mean, that ultimately is what it comes down to. So if we can manage that in our downs and our monthlies, that's really what keeps that, that cash flow coming in. So I'm just kind of curious, if doctors are listening to this and they're thinking about that, some of those pieces, do you think, like, even going forward, should we be looking at raising our fees? Should we be looking at doing some of those knee-jerk reactions where I kind of think we had that in the last couple of years? Or should we just kind of hold steady and let us get out of this kind of inflationary period, per se?
Yeah. And hopeful that there can be some change to the inflationary period as we move into 25, 26. I mean, there will have to be, if we're going to see the growth that the economy is predicting. And like I said, we have some outside economists that we look into as well. I mean, they've projected that 25 and 26 will be really good years. So when it comes to fees, I mean, I think you still have to be, I don't want to use the word super aggressive, but you have to be prudent on that. I mean, I think, just if you look at just your daily life, whether it's your electric bill, your cable bill, your phone bill, I mean, there's been a lot of price increases and they've been almost double digit on a lot of these things. Groceries, right? Restaurants. I mean, even now you go into restaurants, you look at the menu, you're like, that cheeseburger is now $22, not $14 or whatever it is. So, those are pretty egregious when it comes to that. So, I mean, I think, as business owners, you have to make sure that you're adjusting for that, right? And look at the full P&L. You have to understand, okay, what is that doing to my top line? Then my expenses, wages going up a little bit with staff. That's your biggest spending Pareto. You've got to figure that out. What does that look like when it comes to the bottom line? And what are you getting from an EBITDA perspective on the bottom? So I think you got to take all that stuff into account. But I always want to focus on just the processes and the systems too in the practice, because one of the data elements that doesn't seem to get better year over year is what we call our patient funnel, or the leaky bucket, when it comes to, hey, who calls me, who comes in for exam, and who goes into a start. And through that whole process, there are tools now that are out there that can really help navigate through each one of those different areas, and just being aware of the metrics and who's in those buckets. I mean, I'll give you one example. Observation is a big one for us. I mean, even in the Gaidge system, you can see your observation patients stamped by age and bucketed by age. And so if you think about those that are of orthodontic age, are you actively managing a funnel, right? It's a sales patient funnel to bring those folks into the practice. And so if we start looking at the data, we'll see 55, 56% of patients are 12 or older that are in your observation bucket. So question is who are those patients, and are you actively working them to come into your practice because essentially they are orthodontic ready? That's one example.
Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
I think just even the new patient call to exam, we have our Gaidge consult manager now has a handful, over a few hundred users that we've started to collect some data on as well. And, you go back to, when did the call come in and then when was the exam? And then did they say yes or did they say no? And so there's a lot of correlating data that the longer you wait to get them in for an exam, the less chance you have to convert them into a start. How are you managing that process on the front end to get them into the practice? So those are things that as an orthodontist, you really got to be mindful of your systems and your processes, especially when it comes to the patient funnel of how you're moving those patients through. And then if you do have them in observation, how are you actively managing that so they don't just go somewhere else? So I think those are a couple areas that they should be focused on.
Yeah. And I think you are so spot on with that. And it really is something I think, probably even 5 years ago, we weren't even thinking about. It just really wasn't something that it was like this kind of just area that we really only care about them once they get into the practice, and what is our conversion from exam to start. And now knowing that, especially seeing how much doctors are putting into marketing and all the things that go into that. I mean, in my opinion, this is something I work with on my clients a lot, is we absolutely have to be paying attention to that, almost more so than, or at least I don't want to say more so, but it is such a leaky bucket that I just don't think we have paid attention to enough. And we can't not pay attention to it going forward.
Yeah. We have these 3 profitability metrics as we've run this regression analysis, as we put together the Gaidge operational data with the QuickBooks expense Pareto data that we have. And so what comes out is, the biggest things to drive profitability is this starts per day, right? So if you think about condensing your metric down to every day I go to work, how many starts am I getting? How do I focus my team around that metric, right? Starts per day. What am I doing? And the average is about 3.1 to be successful. And so if you think about, okay, I'm there every day, I want to get at least 3, that's kind of for a single doctor practice, but obviously more if you have multiple doctors, associates, things like that. That's really important. And then value per visit is another one. That's how you treat them. And then managing expenses to a degree is another one. But the biggest Pareto item is that starts per day. To your point, okay, if I'm marketing, if I've got my patient funnel here, how am I spending my dollars? What's my ROI? How am I getting that to turn into starts? And so being able to understand that is really, really important on the front end. But I think that starts per day really distills it down into a very bite-sized, digestible metric that doctors can follow to really kind of get their teams centered around, when they.
Yeah. Well, I think that really is it. There's so many things that go into being a business owner. And as you know, a lot of my clients are younger doctors starting off and getting their legs under them as business owners. And
Sure.
trying to understand the metrics and the data and realizing that that is something you have to focus on when you're just like, I just need to figure out how to run my clinic or hire an employee. But if you can keep your eye on these things, that really is what really helps you going forward, obviously, and growing that practice. And so as we move on, and before we jump into where you see 2025 going, I'm just curious if when you looked at data, if there were any other big surprises from last year or anything that you think we need to be paying attention to as far as the orthodontic industry and where we're heading, moving forward. I know we just talked a lot about that funnel, new patient funnel and the leaky bucket there, but anything else you think we need to?
Well, I think I covered the big ones, what I would say were surprises. So I guess going into the year, I thought maybe we would get back to that 2 to 3% growth. Now we got one. Okay, great. But the front half of the year really, kind of put us behind the eight ball a little bit. But to see the back half, I guess I'm pleased with that. But I understand the election year, the inflationary stuff, some of the stuff with the economy, obviously that played into it. I still think I would have hoped they would take it more in price. It was really good to see that the adult starts turned around, the adult exams and starts turned around. So I'm really encouraged by that. That was surprising because we haven't seen that in the last few years. So that was really good to see. And then, I felt like a lighter share going backwards. I talked about that before.
Yeah.
Was more surprising versus it continuing to move towards 30 and above.
Yeah.
So, and having a third consecutive year of close to double digits on the decline. It was a little bit surprising to me. I thought, turn around a little bit. I do hear good things as there's a lot of analysts I read and going into 2025 as they look at, LRyan and Envista and 3M, those or Solventum now is what they're called, that I feel like there's some positive momentum, that they're building and, looking at buy ratings on the stocks and things like that. So I think this year should be a lot better. And I think even through the first 10 days, as we look at aligner growth, it's been a lot better than it was in the past. I'm not, it's 10 days of data. You can't really make conclusions on it, but at least, hey, it's going that way versus that way. So it's always good to see.
So let's jump into 2025. Let's talk about where you see things moving. I know we're 10 days in, we're seeing some positive move on aligners. What do you think docs should have their eyes on looking ahead? Thank goodness, election year, not for another 4 years. Yes. So we're good there. We should see hopefully some changes with inflation. But what do you think docs should be focusing on, or a few things that they should be thinking about as we're gearing up for 2025?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a positive year. And I always want to mention, obviously being from a data analytics company, I think it's really important to understand your metrics, understand that can be overwhelming in certain areas to know that. But I think there's a handful that you should look at. I always have a lot of conviction around the funnel that I just talked about and understanding just from who calls you to comes in to it for an exam and then who starts. I think that is a really big opportunity. Those are big deals for us. Like even last year, we put together what we call the big three scoreboard or scorecard. And so I go back to that starts per day, and we've actually done a linear regression model to where we can see profit per day and starts per day on the different axes in a scatter plot. Are you above that curve or below that curve? And so, it's very prescriptive if you're above or below. And then are you on the average of 3 starts a day, above it or below it? And what does that mean for your practice? What should you focus on? Are you efficient? Do you manage expenses? Have you invested appropriately? Those types of things as far as like where the doctor should be focused based on where they fall on that continuum. Mm-hmm. That's all stuff that Gaidge we can show you and walk you through. But I guess to simplify this, I think you go back to, as you go into 2025, I would expect a growth year in the space. And so the question is are you maximizing that growth by making sure that every one of those phone calls that comes in, you understand how it gets converted into an exam and how that gets converted into a start. And then if you have them in pending or an observation, how are you actively managing that to move them in? And then one other thing that we've been working with, we've been partnering with Retainers for Life on an analysis. And so spent a couple hours with LRyan, I think their CEO over there. And, we looked at a lot of the Gaidge data when it comes to annual D bands. And then we have a lot of the financial data, the accounting data, that tells us, how much does an appointment cost? What does it look like from that standpoint? And so, if doctors are looking to add another revenue stream to their practice, this is an opportunity. And then, from a math standpoint, obviously you can do it in-house or you can outsource it to the lab, but then kind of having somebody do it for you through this Retainers Through Life program. We've done the math on it to where, you do charge the patient up front. The doctor gets a cut of that. The team gets a cut of that as part of the model. And then they take care of a lot of the back end stuff for you. But if you look at just even the profitability on that, I think it's another potential based on the Gaidge data of the D bands and having a conversion rate of retainers for life, I think is around 67% or something like that.
Yeah.
It's another $300,000 to $300,000 of potential production that a practice can do. We've calculated that it saves about 1,042 hours, can be seen annually. And then even the patient themselves going through this process because they get to pay costs for their replacement retainers versus having to pay the lab or the in-house at the market price. It's about a $1,364 savings for them over the span of that treatment time. I think this is a really cool thing that doctors could potentially invest in or look. You don't really have to invest in anything. It's really, you got to sell your patients on it. But from their perspective, if they're going to be in retention long-term, this is a much more financially feasible way for them to be in it. And then the doctor doesn't have to do much other than just take the revenue share and be the broker in between, basically.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that is such a key point. And I just want docs to hear that again. It's taking that revenue share, because I think for so long we have thought that, you need to do all the work. And how about let's just marriage, your company, another company together and be able to just profit on that. And I'm going to echo everything that you just said. A retainer program in your practice is such a great way to add production into your practice with such a minimal amount of work if it's done right. And I agree. Retainers for Life, fantastic company. Amy Jackson did a fantastic job bringing that to the market for us. And, just that one little tiny tool for any of my docs, you are leaving lots of money on the table and not thinking about that. You're not making money through retainer visits. And people who've heard me on stage, you'll hear me say we should not have a whole lot of retainer visits, but if you can produce through that, I just think that's like low hanging fruit that we should be thinking about. And that's just such an easy thing that really is not even a hard sell, because the patients already understand what it took to get their teeth straight. And now you're just giving them the tools to keep them straight. And, you're just making money off of it. So I think that's a great pearl right there.
Yeah. And they have tiered offerings too. So depending upon the appetite for the patient, what they want to pay, there's different tiered offerings, but like that's where that 300 to 350K comes into place across this average continuum. So, but I really enjoyed just, I've got to know the company over the last couple of years, and it's kind of the curiosity is like, okay, can we partner together? What, we've got this Gaidge data, but what does it mean? And then you got this retainer data. So then, Lorraine and I sat down for a couple of hours to put the model together. And for me, it really solidified it for me. It's kind of a no-brainer within an orthodontic practice to be able to do that. And just, it's called mailbox money, right? It's,
yes.
So you don't have to do much with it. They take care of all of it. And it's not a burden you have to do. You don't have to have your in-house lab, or you don't have to worry about the shipping and the tracking and all that stuff with your lab. So there's time and effort and cost that's all baked into that they take that all plate. Plus they give you a rev share for basically selling the program. So and that's what we kind of calculated the time was only maybe 5 to 10 minutes a case, right? Versus if you're going to do it in-house or have to track shipping and have another appointment, seat it and all that kind of stuff. Just, it seemed to take over. It makes sense financially. So just one other kind of data point, Pearl, as we go into 25, I thought this was low hanging fruit that we should just mention it on this podcast because it was a fun little analysis today.
Yeah. Well, and I'm always, trying to encourage my docs, think, who's your who, right? We don't have to do everything in our practice. There are a lot of really great companies, Smile Suite, all kinds of different companies out there that, number one, help us keep our overhead down potentially with employees. But why not use an expert in an area to manage the things that you need? And you get to just stay really focused and dialed in and directed into growing your practice and just running a refined and defined business as we move. I really do think that's kind of the takeaway in, as we're moving forward and looking ahead. I personally believe gone are the days where we have to do everything ourselves.
Sure.
There's so many amazing companies like Gaidge, like, the different ones that we've talked about that we can gather the data, and doctors don't need to spend all this time trying to figure out the answers themselves, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So as we finish up here, I'd love it if you've got any additional things that you think we need to be thinking about. But I definitely want, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, if they want to find out more about Gaidge or any of the companies under the Practice Tech umbrella, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest is just gaidge.com, and right at the top of the website, you're going to see book a demo. And that way you'll get plugged into our sales team, JC, and she'll walk you through kind of the different offerings that we have. And, Gaidge has become more than just data analytics. I mentioned we have our Gaidge Consult Manager that really helps in the patient conversion process. That's also tied to digital patient intake forms. So I talked about the synergies with Practice Tech and some of the different companies that they have. We've been able to white label some of those solutions into the Gaidge product. We also have our executive program where you can hook up your accounting system and get that data. So you get that full P&L look. And then we also have a projections module within there as well, where you can actually kind of put in your, if I want to grow production by 10%, what does that mean to my patient funnel, right? It means I have to have X number of calls, X number of exams, X number of starts. And then, I want to go to aligners to be 30% share of chair. That means, then it backs it up into, what do you have to do on the front end? What that starts per day look like in order for you to get there? So it's a way for you to play with it like a slider mentality, and then set goals based on that. So,
yeah,
those are just kind of fun. That comes along with the accounting package as well. So Gaidge is doing a lot more than just data analytics. There's some other software solutions that it offers out there that you all should check out as well. So gaidge.com demo, sales@gaidge.com, email, they'll plug you in there. And then you can always reach me, Ryan@gaidge.com, GAIDGE. The other way, it's a non-traditional spelling. All those ways we can definitely connect you however you need to be.
Perfect. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day once again to just kind of give us the look backwards and then the look forwards. You're always one of the ones out there that I know we all look to, and appreciate you being a data geek, because we need somebody to really get into that and then be able to give us that information quickly and make it actionable items for us. So thanks again
Thank you for having me on. It's always a joy to be here. So thanks so much.
Well, if you remember from last time, I like to finish up Hey Docs with a little speed round. Are you ready? Ready for that?
Sure.
Okay. Yep. What's one daily habit or ritual that helps you stay productive or balanced?
I used to go to this 5:30 a.m. workout every day. It was called Shred 415. And it was kind of a combination of HIIT and treadmill running. And they closed down. They actually membership dropped. They closed down. So I now went over to Lifetime, the gym, lose a lot of weight. I'm eating better, but I'm doing a lot more diversity of working out. So I think I was so regimented in this one type of workout, my body was just used to it and wasn't doing it. So I guess the biggest thing to stay productive and balanced is getting up and doing something very early in the morning at 5:30. So every morning, 5:30, and I've got a personal trainer that I've used now. So I combine that with pickleball, personal training, classes, just doing it on my own, all that kind of stuff. But Lifetime has been just a wonderful treat these last 3 or 4 months. It's definitely had some good results, and I feel a whole lot better, which has been great. So I feel like that has helped calibrate me throughout the day. In addition to that, on the way there, I'm doing kind of a daily devotional in the car, playing that on there and back, which is great. And then my wife is a yoga teacher, so she's got me into, and I'm not full blown there yet, but every now and then some meditation. Now, I won't sit up and do it. I'll always be laying in a bed doing it because half the time I'll fall asleep. But at least it's a good way to try to clear what is always an active mind, and just try new things. So those are a couple areas that I try to stay focused and balanced, I guess.
Oh, that's great. And sometimes the things that you think are good for us, sometimes that change is actually better for us. So that's awesome. What's your go-to strategy for getting unstuck when facing a tough problem?
Yeah, I guess a natural inclination would be to try to fix it right away. So I'm trying to do more of the pause and breathe. Mm-hmm. And then I am a big fan of just collaboration with the team. That's one of the areas that I think in any role you have, you don't know everything, and you actually don't know a lot of things, but collectively as a team, you guys can put a lot of stuff together. If there's something that I can't solve on my own that's in my jurisdiction, I guess, then I would definitely try to just pause, think it through, but then also engage the team, because I think that way it helps you just unlock maybe where your brain is on a one track versus, looking at it from a broader spin.
Awesome. All right. If you could add one unconventional perk to the everyday workplace, what would it be?
I'd put a pickleball court in the middle of the office.
I so agree with you on that one.
We need to get one at the AAO in one of the booths and just probably not allowed based on insurance, but I would love to see a company do that.
I would totally agree with you on that. And I keep saying, I just want to invest in a pickleball facility. So if anyone's out there, hit me up. What's one business idea you've recently seen that you wish you had thought of?
Well, sticking on that theme. Here in Atlanta, they have this company. It's kind of like Topgolf, but it's called the Pickler. And so it's a similar concept where you go in, you got food, you got drink, you got TVs, but you also have pickleball courts. So they're opening up one a little bit north of me here. We were talking about, gosh, that would have been a fun venture to get into with where pickleball is in the world. I don't know if it's franchised, but it's called the Pickler.
All right.
And it looks pretty awesome as far as just a cool little place to go and play. They're going to have tournaments, leagues, and all that kind of fun stuff. I wish I was on the forefront of that one.
Denver doesn't have anything like that. So maybe we need to talk.
I live in Denver. Who knows? I move over there.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Ryan, again, thanks so much for being on. I know we'll connect up at one of the conferences coming up, but as always, thanks for the insight. All right. See you later.
Yeah. Take care.